Welcome to the Fraternity Foodie podcast. This is the top podcast for college students and college administrators to geek out with the positives, the negatives, and everything in between that's happening on your campus. It's time to ask the difficult questions and find real solutions. We are talking to the best guests on the planet about fraternities, sororities, college life, and of course, we're looking for great food in college towns all across North America. And here is your host, speaker, entrepreneur, resident foodie, and Greek University CEO, Mike Ayalon.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to episode number 86 of Fraternity Foodie. I am your host, Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University. We call these episodes Fraternity Foodie because there is nothing like great food to bring people together. Today, we are going to be talking about public speaking skills and why that is so important to develop, not only for all college students, but also for new professionals. And everybody listening to this podcast is going to walk away with some great information on how to improve their public speaking skills. So today we have with us Brenden Kumarasamy today, and he helps people learn how to develop public speaking skills. He's got his own YouTube channel. It's called MasterTalks. I started going through all the videos and I'm like, this is amazing material. I have to make sure that Brenden comes on to tell you all about it. So welcome to the show, Brenden.
That's very kind of you, Michael. It's great to be here.
Hey, it's great to have you on the show. I think, you teach some amazing skills. I wish that I would have met you when I was a college student, right? I need that mentor to come and tell me, hey, this is important stuff. Listen, it's going to help you to get a better job, and it's going to help you to get your message out and to help more people, right?
Absolutely. I wish I met me in college too. that was just a tease though.
I love it. I love it. So let's talk a little bit about your background. I want the audience to know a little bit more about you. Right now, you're working for IBM as a business transformation consultant. So tell our audience, what types of things are you doing in this role for IBM?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best way of starting is probably the origin story. I guess that'll lead up to what happened at IBM. So when I was 5 years old, I was born and raised in a city called Montreal up in Canada, where everyone lives in igloos, basically. And my parents came up to me and they said, well, Brenden, you live in Montreal, so you need to learn how to speak French. So I got thrown into a French education system. I'm very grateful for that now. But my whole life, not only was I uncomfortable with the idea of presentations, like everyone, I had to present in a language I didn't even know. So you can imagine me in a grade 1 classroom, kind of standing at everyone, staring, going, bonjour. And that was my life for the vast majority of it. And then what happened when I went to university is I started doing these things called case competitions. So think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So while other guys my age would probably play football or different types of sports, I did that with presentations. And that's what ultimately led to me working at IBM, where I help a lot of my clients transition with different technological solutions. But in addition to that, being happy at the company and everything, I also asked myself what I could do to make a difference in the world. And what I realized was a lot of the public speaking information was really bad on the internet, and more specifically on YouTube. So I started making videos and I didn't think much of it, but then, the practice grew and I ended up building a business off of it. But it was a great and interesting journey, not one I expected for sure.
That's awesome. So I love this YouTube channel that you've created. Again, it's called MasterTalks. And obviously you have a passion for helping people with their public speaking skills. So for our audience, it's largely college students and college administrators. Why is it important for college students to work on their public speaking skills?
Absolutely. I think the way that I see it, Michael, is public speaking has very little to do with presentations. Public speaking is everything. And presentation is a small part of it. It's the conversations that we have with our teammates at school. It's the way that we communicate to the people that we love. It's the way that we have tough conversations. Every little fragment of our lives is public speaking, is communication. So if there's any skill you want to master at a young age, it's definitely this one. And that's why I started making free videos, because I know it's very expensive to hire a speech coach for people. So this way, college students from around the globe in the US especially, but, everywhere who can't afford me can say, hey, I got these resources and I can use this to share my ideas with the world. And those ideas don't need to be a YouTube channel or a podcast like yours. They can just be a recipe that you care about, a volunteering initiative that you want to start, a nonprofit that you want to help build. It doesn't matter what the thing is. Communication allows you to amplify that thing so you can share it with more people.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Now, obviously, we are in a pandemic right now. I don't need to tell you that. And there are many people out there that are just not very confident speaking in front of a camera like we're doing right now, especially as we're all working in these Zoom environments or Microsoft Teams, what have you. So how can you be more confident when you're speaking in front of a camera, but there's actually no person in the room with you?
And I'm sure you had a similar story to mine, Michael. You kind of wake up the next morning and realize that all of your live speaking events transitioned all of a sudden in front of your computer. So
That's right.
So I'm definitely not a stranger to that either. I've had my share of turns of events this year, but I think the idea, and one thing we need to emphasize with virtual, is the biggest difference between in-person and virtual is this idea that we can't gauge our audience's reaction. So let's say I'm presenting at a college, like you do a lot, and I'm speaking to a group of students, and I tell a joke. One of two things is going to happen. Number one, they're either going to laugh and say, man, Brendan's such a funny guy. Or two, which is much more likely, they're going to look at me and say, this guy's not funny. Why is he telling jokes? He's just not. But either way, I get the real-time feedback, and I'd say, oh, wait, I'm not funny. Let me change my tune.
Right.
But in the online world, you don't have that luxury. Even in this very conversation we're having right now, I actually can't really tell how you're reacting to me because I'm not looking at you, Michael. I'm looking at the camera lens, so that it seems like I'm looking at you directly, even if I'm not really. So imagine a Zoom call with 20, 25, or even 500 people. Everyone's a little screen on a computer. You can't tell if anyone's laughing at whatever you're saying or enjoying what you're saying. So that means the same joke that you said with the same energy, the same positivity, and the same rigor, you need to say it in the exact same way and assume people are laughing. And that is the challenge of the online world. So how do we fix this? Two things. One is what I call the virtual room. So the virtual room is essentially you get a bunch of people, or the courtroom rather, virtual courtroom. You get a bunch of people that are highly critical in your life to judge everything that you do. From what the hair looks, to the way that your face looks, because I got lighting here, to the way that I'm dressed, every little nook and cranny, they ask you a bunch of questions about your presentation. They judge you every little part of it. So when it's time for the real thing, you're going to be a lot more confident. The second part of it is imagining the perfect audience. So when I started going on podcasts, it's very odd because you're being asked questions by a stranger and you're just looking at them like, why are they asking me questions about my life? But over time, what happens is the mindset that we have of our audience shifts. It goes from, I don't know who this guy is, to, hey, Michael is doing a lot of great work with this podcast. He's probably trying to add a lot of free value for the people around him. So I'm going to assume as if I've known Michael for many years and speak to him in that way. That takes a while to get used to, but it gradually happens.
Yeah, I've been getting much better at it now that we have 85 episodes of the podcast. You can imagine now I'm like, oh yeah, it's no big deal. We've been friends for years.
Exactly.
So what speaking tips do you have for introverts? Because many of us don't come by these speaking skills naturally. If you're an introvert, what should you do?
Of course, the good old introvert question. So this is how I always like to answer. And I made a whole video dedicated to that if for people who want to see that.
Yeah.
But the punchline is that this whole thing about introverts being bad speakers is a myth. It's actually the biggest myth that I've seen in this space. Let me explain why. There are three things that introverts do better than any extrovert ever could, like myself. Number one, they're very good at pauses. So you know as well as I do that pauses and silences are a great way to emphasize key parts of your message. But one thing not many people talk about is that for an introvert, this is very easy to learn because they spend more time on average in silence. So it's much easier for them to live and be comfortable in the pause. Whereas someone like me is very loud, and maybe you, not really sure, but in my case, I'm a very loud person. I love going to parties and events. I'm always talking to people. So if there's nothing in the middle and there's nothing being said, I start to panic and fill it up with space. So it took me a long time to get used to the pauses. Whereas every introvert I've coached in my life kind of just looks at me and says, Yeah, I get it. And in 3 days they master it. I'm just like, whoa, this is pretty impressive. Number 2, listening. Oh boy, extroverts don't do a great job at this. Once again, pointing at myself, you're guilty as charged. I talk all the time, as you probably tell. That's why I'm a podcast guest, right? I talk. You're like, God, man, when is this guy gonna stop? But you got an introvert in the same position who's much better at gauging what their audience is looking for him or her. What are they trying to get out of this person? It's much easier for the introvert to mold what they expect from the presentation with what you're trying to achieve, because you're spending more time in silence, which means you're listening more. Number 3, introverted speakers are much less polarizing. So what do I mean by this? Let's take Gary Vaynerchuk as an example, somebody that most people would probably know. I love Gary personally, but because he's an extroverted speaker, probably one of the most extroverted ones in the speaking circuit today, a huge percentage of the audience loves him and goes, wow, Gary Vee changed my life. And I'm definitely one of those people. But you also have an equal amount of people that go, I hate this guy. He's too loud. He's too obnoxious. What is he trying to do? But if you compare someone like Gary Vee to a Susan Cain, who wrote the book Quiet, The Power of Introverts, Brene Brown, Vulnerability, and Seth Godin, who's similar to Gary in marketing, but he's a lot more introverted. Nobody ever goes, oh, this Seth Godin guy? I don't really like him. This Brene person? I don't like that. Susan? Not so much. Nobody says that about those people. Why? Because since they're more introverted, they're much less polarizing as speakers, which means the appeal to a larger group of people. So what am I trying to get at with this long spiel about introverts? Is that introverts are actually much better at speaking. So the key message is it doesn't matter if you're an introvert or extrovert, learn from the other person and be exceptional.
Wow, that is really deep. I love that answer. I'm an introvert, so I guess I have an advantage when it comes to public speaking.
I mean, hence your success, right?
That's good to know. Now I know why. That's awesome. So, all right. So, what about the other listeners that we have here today that might be on the opposite end of the spectrum? What speaking tips do you have for people who are extroverts?
Oh, okay. No one usually asks the other way around, but I love it. So the key is to understand your strengths as well. So there's vocal projection that we do really well. We're a lot less afraid to take risk because we're used to getting rejected all the time when we're at events. And the third thing is this idea of eye contact. It's much easier for an extrovert to hold a gaze with somebody for a much longer period of time than an introvert can. But besides those things, I would say the big piece of advice that I have for people is what I call the repeatable presentation. So what is that? Most people, when they practice, especially if you're a college student in school, like most of the people that are listening right now, you're always changing your presentation. You got a class in English, you got math, you got sciences, you're always switching up the presentation, which means you're only getting incrementally better. Whereas what the best speakers in the world do, the people that get paid a living like you, is they say, okay, well, I got 3 talks, 2 talks, 1 talk. Let me present it so well that people want to pay me for it. I recommend that advice, even if you're not someone who wants to be a professional speaker. Because if you can find something that you really care a lot about and you pour all of your effort into that one presentation, your communication skills will skyrocket exponentially. And the confidence that you get from that one talk will make you a better communicator overall.
Got it. And makes total sense to me. That is really good. The other thing that I notice when I'm speaking with college students on college campuses is that I'm hearing a lot of the ums and the ahs in their presentations. So how would somebody get rid of those ums and ahs when they're speaking?
Absolutely, Michael. So the trick there is you want to replace your ums and ahs with pauses and silences. So whenever you're about to say a filler word, which is usually when you forget what to say next, 1 second, Michael, and then I got to say this. Whereas what great speakers do is if I don't know how to answer Michael's question, I just say nothing. And then I answer the question. So how do you go from A to B? The best way to go there is the fastest way is to get better at pauses overall. So in order for you to pause comfortably for 5 seconds, you need to get used to, and I know this is extreme, you need to get used to pausing for 5 minutes. So what I do with my clients to get them results in like a week and to break all those stigmas, in person especially, when I used to do in-person workshops anyways, I would make them pause for 5 minutes. So I would just sit there and stare at everyone individually until 5 minutes left by, and you wouldn't see an ounce of awkwardness in my face. Because what the great speakers in the world don't tell us is that they can pause forever and not make it ever seem awkward. It's just we don't have forever in this case. What the point that I'm driving is, even if we can't practice like out there anymore, go to somebody that you love in your house. Could be a brother, a sister, a partner, family member, children, doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
So in a college case, probably your parents or something.
Mm-hmm.
Go up to them and stare at them for 3 minutes and don't say anything. And let's see how long you last. And if you can do that, you'll be in a much better position to master your filler words in general.
I love it. I absolutely love it. All right, I'm going to try that later tonight. I want to talk about this mastering silence, because I think you're right about that. Anybody who is a really good speaker knows how to use those pauses to emphasize their point. So why is it more effective if I can master silence?
Right. I think a way that we can see this is whenever we pause, it gives us an indication, or the audience an indication rather, that this person has something important to say. So if I say, let's say sentence 1, and I go, Michael's a hardworking employee. He loves working there, and he's doing well for himself at Vitality Health. That was great. I mean, it's great content, I guess. But what was he trying to say anyways? I didn't really understand. But if I say the exact same sentence and I go, Michael is a very nice person. He's been at Vitality Health for the past 30 years and he loves his job. And if there's one thing we need to remember about him, is that amazing smile that he has in his face every time that he walks into a room. So notice how, because I'm slowing down, I'm using sound, you're like, who's this Kevin/Michael guy, right? So the key is you practice one presentation. After 5 or 10 times, you kind of just ask yourself, since I know my content now, because I presented it so many times,
mm-hmm.
How can I better leverage pauses? So what I recommend people do is every slide that you have in the deck, you can just say, pause 5 seconds before in the notes, pause 3 seconds after. And that way, when you practice with yourself, you're like, okay, I need to pause now. I need to stop. I need to pause again. And then you'll be a lot more intuitive with it over time, like we are.
I love it. That is fantastic. And what are 3 ways that I can effectively close a speech? What do you recommend there?
That's very specific.
Yes.
You're like 3 ways that I can close specifically. Sure. So the way that I talk about ending a speech is the following. Most people start like this. They have this amazing movie with a terrible ending, which means it's a terrible movie. And what most people struggle with is closing, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Intros aren't so bad. They're challenging, but not as hard as the conclusion. Because the biggest mistake most people make with it is they just re-summarize their points. They start this amazing show, and at the end they go, yeah, so what did we learn today? And I was like, what happened? Just I thought we were on a roll here. So here's a couple of ways that you can do this creatively. My favorite one is called the vision state. So the vision state is, instead of summarizing your points, help us imagine a world where we implement your ideas. So the way that I usually close my keynotes in colleges and companies and the like is I help my audience imagine a future in which everyone wasn't scared of public speaking anymore. So it sounds something like this. Imagine a world where nobody was scared of public speaking. If we all were able to share our ideas with the world, what would that world look like? We would all realize that our ideas matter and that we matter. So I encourage all of you not just to take the lessons of this podcast and consume it, but share your ideas because they matter, because people that care need to hear what you have to say. Thank you. And then I close like that. So that's a lot more empowering because we're imagining a future that's enticing, that's compelling, that people want to hear. That's one way. So another way that I can think of, you're really making me think on my feet here, is the one sentence close. So the one sentence close is when you summarize everything in one sentence. I'll give an example. I was working with a startup. We're currently working on an app to help people, find missing children. It's really interesting. And the founders are like 15, so it's super fun. And they were asking me, they're like, Brenden, like, how do we close this presentation? I just thought there and I just said, why don't you just say this? We're this app and we believe that no children should be left behind. Thank you very much. So that's like a one sentence called simple, clean, tight. People go, whoa, I don't want to leave a child behind.
Right. Nobody wants to, right?
Right. Yeah, there you go. And then a third one, geez. Okay, here's one that that's maybe not as good as the first two, but still powerful for those who are getting started, is a better way to re-summarize the content. So what I mean by that is most people, they go, here are the 7 bullet points that we learned today. Don't do that. Instead, focus on the 1 key or 2 key objectives from the presentation. So let's say in my keynotes as well, and sometimes when I close for more like senior people, as I pretty much summarize the points. But what I do in that situation is I pause in between them much more powerfully. And I also use analogies within by complementing the organization. So I would say something like, let's say I was speaking to McDonald's. I would close with, the golden arches of McDonald's are not an accident. They're a way of communicating and sharing a message with one. That's why in today's workshop, we learned that we can communicate together as a team, not just with the brands that we showcase for your company, but also in how you communicate internally. So I would kind of tie in as a complement to what they're doing with a re-summarize. So we can call this re-summarizing 2.0.
I like it. I really do like that a lot. So, you have some time here where you spent out of college now and you're building your career. I'm wondering, if you could go back and speak to Brenden when he was in college, what 3 things do you wish you knew back then when you were in college that you know now?
So many great. That's a great question. So many things, but let's try and summarize this to 3. Number 1, okay, a lot of people in college don't know how to pick a career. They're like, oh, I don't really know, Brenden. So my advice, what I did is I used a technique called process by elimination. It's a lot more empowering to say no to something than to look at a massive list of careers and not know which one to pick from. So what I did is I asked myself the simple question, what did I not want to be? I didn't want to be a plumber. I didn't want to be a pastor. And I just kept going. I didn't want to be a scientist. I didn't want to be a doctor. Nothing wrong with those careers. So for you who's listening to me, you might say, I actually want to do those things. That's the key. Find the list by saying no to everything else, and you will find what you need to say yes to. Second thing is understand the price you're willing to pay for the life you want to live. So everything in life has a price. If you want to go to med school, it's going to cost you 10 years of your life, a certain amount of salary, and you have to give up a certain amount of things. So what I've always found is if you look at a sacrifice and you see it as not really a sacrifice at all, that's probably an indicator that you should be doing the thing. So for me, you won't see me trying to get into the NBA. Why? Because it's not worth it for me to spend 16 hours a day working out. I don't want to do that. It's painful. It's not a sacrifice I'm willing to make. But going on 100 podcasts, absolutely happy to. Going on 10,000 podcasts, I'm happy to. Because it allows me to share a message. I'm happy to work 13 hours a day and do that. But for some people listening to me right now, I don't want to do that, Brenden. That's the key. Figure out what sacrifices you're willing to make for the life you want to live. And it'll be much easier to figure out where to make the sacrifices. Number 3, which is my most important tip, and a quote that pretty much summarizes my life, is be insane or be the same. If you're still listening to this, you're still listening to what we have to say, the only advice I have left for you is understanding what happened with my life. At the age of 22, I started a YouTube channel on public speaking communication tips, not pranks, not vlogging, not comedy, but on professional speaking tips. Then I went to coach CEOs of companies at 23, and I went on to speak on all these stages. But I also live in my mother's basement. How do any of these decisions make any sense at all? And that is the punchline, everyone. If the decisions that you make sense to the only person that matters, which is you, you're probably making the right decisions.
Wow. Fantastic. Our college students are absolutely going to love that. That is really good stuff. Now, I went to school at the University of Buffalo, so I'm no stranger to Canada. We spent a lot of time hopping over to Toronto, mostly Montreal, every now and then. That's a little bit further of a trip, but certainly an amazing city. Now, we love good food here at Fraternity Foodie. So the next time I'm speaking out in Montreal, I need a restaurant recommendation from you so I know where to go to get good food, because that's what I care about. That's what I'm passionate about, is good food. So where should I go? What's your favorite restaurant in town?
Oh, that is literally the easiest question you've asked me today. There is no doubt in my mind. It's this restaurant called, unless you're a vegan, then in that case I apologize.
Oh,
But the restaurant that in that case we're on the same page.
Yes.
Called Ma Poule Mouillée, which is French for wet chicken. It is the best Portuguese chicken in like it's one of the top rated restaurants in the country, and the chicken is $10. It's
Wow.
$10 Canadian. So for
Canadian.
you, that's like $2.
I think the restaurant owes me money.
Yeah, something like that. So I think I've taken up until this point 5 different countries to that restaurant. Something like that.
Yeah.
If there's any restaurant you absolutely need to go to, it is that restaurant. I swear by the chicken. I can't live without it, honestly.
Listen, the price is right. I mean, you just said the price, and I'm like, all right, done. Let's go.
And yeah.
That is fantastic. This has been a lot of fun. I think it's going to be really helpful to our college students that are listening. So if our listeners want to connect with you, maybe they want you as a coach to help improve their public speaking skills, where should they go to connect with you?
Absolutely. So the YouTube channel is probably the easiest way to see the videos. That's MasterTalk in one word. And if you want to reach out to me directly, the best way to do that is Instagram. So you can message me directly at Master Your Talk. And of course, I have my email in my YouTube channel, which is brendenkbusiness@gmail.com.
This has been fantastic. Thank you so much for the time. I really, really appreciate it. And for all of our listeners, if you like this, please like the video. Please share it. Brenden wants everybody in the world to see all of his helpful tips. So help him by sharing this video. He really appreciates that. So thank you so much, Brenden. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you to our listeners. And we are going to see you on another episode of Fraternity Foodie. Bye for now.